Hey guys, I'm Si and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation, the home of the Andy Campbell Football Show. This is episode number 141. The show's available live on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Ace Podcast Nation, of course, your home to many other great shows and series featuring top guests, expert analysts and more. So do give us a follow on social media, subscribe to that YouTube channel, click the bell for notifications. But if you prefer your podcasts in audio format, every single show that we do, every series we do is available in audio form. Just search Ace Podcast Nation at your favorite podcast or radio platform. And there's well over 400 shows there on all sorts of subjects featuring some very, very interesting people. And of course, if you want to keep it football, follow at A.C.E Footy Show on all social media platforms. But just as we wait for some of the stragglers and the latecomers on those various platforms, a big thank you to Black Diamond Sports as ever for all their support and everything around the show. They've been a massive help, particularly over the last year or so in the pandemic and everything. They're a global sports agency. For those who don't know, they represent sports stars from around the world. For more information, you can visit their social media pages and, of course, their website. Links to which are in the description below and the closing credits at the end of the show. Today's sponsor is Bespoke Financial and Dan Ralston. Darren is giving away a free will with £140 with any new policy which is taken out for viewers and listeners of the show. Please check him out. Give him a call. Don't miss out on what's an incredible offer. You can get his contact details from the description below. You can contact myself or Andy, and we can give you his phone number. And I urge you to give them a shout because they are top of their field. They provide award-winning service. They've looked after Andy for many years on various policies, including critical illness, injury cover, and we're proud to partner with such a top-class brand. We thank them for sponsoring the show, and there'll also be a little video ad later on. But let's get into it. For the third time in 4 days, I'm very happy to introduce the goal collector, the fox in the box, the QPR dream killer, the over 40s league. What legend, I suppose. Cardiff City in the Middlesbrough striker, Davy Jones' favourite son, Mr. Andy Campbell. Welcome, my friends. We have talked a lot.
Yeah, we have. I talk to you more than I talk to anybody. Listen, last night was loads of fun. Really looking forward to tonight, though. This is going to be special. I've challenged myself to see if I can find 5 things that I didn't know about our guest. That's what I've challenged myself to see if I can find 5 new facts. I think I'll struggle. And I'm going to put something to bed, by the way. So I haven't been kicked out by Garen. Thank you very much. I've had a Wi-Fi issue, so I've had to come to a different place to do my show. But I brought one of my shirts with me, so it might just a different backdrop. But yeah, looking forward to it. Can't wait.
What I want to know, mate, is your dad going to ask you questions? Is he going to whisper them in your ear, or is he going to still send them on the chat?
No, I'm not with my dad, but my dad's just texted me there. My dad's just texted me there saying where am I? Because obviously a bit worried about me. So it's fair enough. But I'm sure he'll have some questions for our guest. So looking forward to those.
Indeed, it's interesting, mate, because we both know our guest through very different ways, and I'm very excited to welcome tonight's guest. He is ex Coventry City, Cardiff City and Hartlepool United midfielder, and has been named as the most angriest teammate by various people in the magnificent questions. So tonight he gets to name his own version of that. But it is Mr. Willie Boland. Welcome to the show, mate. How are you?
Good, yeah. How are you, boys? Happy to be here.
Good, Will.
Great to see you both. Just feel a little bit old, actually. You're talking about Andy being like the legend of over 40s football there. When I remember playing with his brother, the over 35s, and he was too young to play over 35. So time moves on pretty quickly, doesn't it?
It does, mate. It does, certainly does. Because listen, we've done this show now. I can't believe how many shows we've done, by the way, and that
250 minutes
shows that, which is unbelievable. And when you speak to players, Will, because I remember we had Kevin Ratcliffe on a couple of months ago, and I remember watching FA Cup finals and seeing him play. And then when he says how old he is, it just makes you, I can't believe it. And obviously, you'll know, one of the guests we had a few weeks ago, Joe Jacobson. Obviously, Joe was at Cardiff with us, and I was calling him Young Joe throughout the show. I don't know why. It was just the way that I was doing it. And then he told us he was 31, and I just nearly fell off my seat, and I just couldn't believe it. I just thought, Jesus, I just had to stop straight away. I was embarrassed, so I just it was great. But no, time doesn't wait for anybody at the minute.
Yeah.
But great to have you on. Love your time, and I can't wait for everyone to really get to know the Willie Boland inside and out. Like I think that me and Si know, but want to know him even more.
Indeed. First request of the evening, Willie. Darren Cole says, "Can you close your curtains behind you?" So there we go. That's the standard of question.
Willie, that's the best question you're going to get tonight. So get used.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, if he's desperate for me to close the curtains, I'll get up and close them. Like, that's not a bother at all.
It's very, very fussy, isn't he? Gee whiz. Right.
It's going to be a long show. It's going
to be a fun one, this one, mate. I can feel it already. So we're going to start off, as ever, with the Magnificent Seven. So basically, Willie, this is 7 quickfire questions on a variety of subjects. Just say the first thing which comes to mind. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay.
Question number 1. Always nice and easy to start. Messi or Ronaldo?
Stumped him.
Have I Messi?
Yeah.
Great shout.
Coventry City or Cardiff City?
Cardiff City.
He doesn't mean it. That's why I laughed. He doesn't mean it.
Yeah.
I do mean it. I definitely mean it.
Well, there's a bit of meaning behind that.
We'll have to ask about that in a minute. Favorite TV show? Sorry, mate. What did you say?
Favorite TV show? I always go for the old classic Only Fools and Horses. Always makes me laugh.
Good stuff. The most hostile game you ever played in?
It has to be the Leeds FA Cup game. Yeah, that was definitely the most hostile game I played in. Favourably in our way, but didn't fancy being a Leeds player in that game.
Don't think they fancied it either, to be fair. Best manager you ever played under?
Is that best manager?
Yeah.
I would say I've been lucky to have quite a few, and I have to name one, do I?
You can pick a couple.
No, I couldn't name one. I'm not naming it. I couldn't name one, to be honest with you.
No, that's fair enough. Angriest teammate you ever played with?
Apparently, I'm quite angry, aren't I? I've heard from quite a few people.
You've had a few votes, Will, to be honest. You've had a few votes.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that.
Teammate that I played with. Is that the question, Si?
Yeah, just angriest player you played with.
I would say Gordon Strachan.
And then the final question is, it doesn't have to be football related, but in your opinion, who is the greatest Irishman who's ever lived?
Oh, that's extremely tough. Michael Collins.
There we go.
You'd have to go into the old politics to realise who he is.
Okay, I'll look that up later because I have no clue. But
I like good answer. I'm hoping it's a good answer. Good answer.
I'm gonna like it. So Willie, first question: why do you hate Coventry?
I don't hate Coventry at all. I just obviously I felt I had a better time in my career in Cardiff and had a lot more games and felt more of a part of the team and played regularly rather than Coventry. I had great times at Coventry. Great people up there as well. But Cardiff was my favourite time in my career. Is that diplomatic enough? Honest as well, to be fair.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Donna says, by the way, did you get on with Dave Jones?
Nobody got on with Dave Jones. Nobody did. You just said yes straight away.
There was I wouldn't say I listen. I didn't listen. Ultimately, he released me from the club. But I think I think it was probably the right decision at the time, from a management point of view. But I did there was a couple of character traits that I didn't like about him. The way he spoke about players to a certain extent. I thought he was a bit disrespectful, because I remember I used to chat with him a little bit because I was injured quite a bit in that last season, and I'd be in the cafeteria and having a sit down with him. I thought he was all right. I thought he was sound enough, but I didn't like the way that he did talk about certain players, and the way that he would say, like, "Oh, I got rid of him," or "I got rid of that player, I got rid of that player," as if they were a piece of meat, sort of thing, like, you know. But that was probably only that, really, you know. Other than that, I thought he was all right. Sorry, Andy.
That's all right. I don't mind. And this is the good thing about football. And this is what I find, Will. You know what I mean? That you'll agree. I think that, and every player that we've had on, that game of football is so opinionated. You know what I mean? The fans will have their opinions on players and managers, and us players have their opinions on managers. And you know what I mean? Lenny could have been my best manager, Willie's worst manager. Jeb Jones could have been vice versa and the opposite. And it is one of those things, because it's just, you love a manager when he plays you. You love a manager when he gives you what you want, but you don't like a manager when he doesn't give you what you want, and it's so frustrating. I won't say don't like, because that's unfair, because, you know what I mean, it's not you don't like him, you're just frustrated with him at the time. You might say some horrible things, and then you might like him the week after. But it's opinions, and you know what I mean. Mine's a little bit more high profile because of what I did more than what he did. You know what I mean. So it's my own fault. You know what I mean. Predominantly, you know what I mean. In the end.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you have to understand that being a manager of a football club is an extremely difficult job. You're not going to keep your whole squad happy. There's going to be occasions where you're going to have a little bit of a fallout with a manager or a manager with a player. The manager's got to try and get the best out of these players, and how he treats them is extremely important. Now, ultimately, I was paid as a football player to play for clubs, and the manager was, you know, the head of that football club. So I would give my all for that manager, whether I liked him or whether I didn't. I played for coaches and managers so I didn't like, but from my own personal pride, I would give 100% every game for that very reason. And it's up to the manager then how he sees that. I wouldn't say I got on with everybody, you know, and I never took what happened in football personally. I don't think you can. I think you need thick skin. You need to be mentally strong to play football. And if you take everything personally, you're not going to survive in the game. It's as simple as that. So I understood, you know, it's difficult to be a manager. I understood that you have to make difficult decisions. I understood that sometimes managers don't fancy certain players. And it happens. That's the game of football, and that's what we buy into. We're both lucky enough to have decent careers in it. So I don't look back and, you know, I've had differences with players and differences with managers, but I tended never wanted to take it off the field, to be honest with you.
Oh, listen, I totally agree there, Ty and Will. I think it's how you handle yourself, you know, and I think you get a good reputation and a good name in football if you do things the right way. And you know what I mean, when I didn't play and when Willie didn't play, you know what I mean, I'd like to think that we handled it in the right manner. We didn't go off whinging, we didn't go off, yes, we were disappointed, you know what I mean, but we didn't go and slag people off and do things, you know what I mean. That the mistake that I made was when Dave got his manager's job at Hartlepool United, I was sat on my phone and I took a tweet out there, which I thought was funny at the time, which wasn't really very funny, but it did what it did. I
think I've seen that tweet actually, yeah.
And my experience now to people and what the advice I tell people is be careful what you put out on your phone, because even if you delete it straight away, it's out there. So what I thought was, I'm not one for deleting things, so I left it out there and it's still out there, which is fine, but then it keeps getting brought back into it, and people keep sending me it every time I say about it and talk about it. So it is what it is. Listen, I agree with Will. He was a good football manager. He did a great job for the club, by the way. You know what I mean? I'll put that one out there. He did an amazing job, and his remit was to bring his own players in, and his job was to get rid of the dead wood in his eyes, to get rid of the players that he didn't want, and he did that. How he did it, was it the right way? In my opinion, no. And that's my own opinion. But I didn't, and I said it to him, but I didn't say it to anybody else because that wasn't my job. He wanted me out of the club, and I left the club.
It's a tricky one.
It happens. Yeah, it happens. To be fair, so I don't think it is, and I'll tell you why. Because this is the game that we're in, and you've got to respect that you're not going to be everyone's flavour, and it happens. I mean, I was lucky enough just to play with 3 clubs and a good sense of those clubs, and you know, I played under a lot of different managers, with those clubs as well, and I know what it's like for a change of manager, that they like to come in and have a player. So you've got to try and make an impression. You got to impress them. And it's nature of the beast. This is football. Yeah. It's a dog eat dog game. You got players there in training up against you who are vying for your spot. You got a manager who's under pressure from the board and from the crowd. it's not as easy as saying, "Oh, I want to look after him." It's like it's a difficult environment to be involved, different industry to be involved. It's great when things are going well, and I loved it. I loved every minute of my career. To be fair, I missed the training, I missed all the banter with the lads. I loved all that part of it. I love being competitive and playing games, but it's a nature of the beast. You need to be performing week in week on, being consistent and impressing. And when managers come in, they have their own ideas about things. You got to respect them.
It's a risk and reward for me, Si. You know what I mean? Because it's the only job, I think, what I know anyway, is where you've got no protection. You know what I mean? Whereas you could be released tomorrow, you could be out of work tomorrow. Whereas, and that's without doing anything wrong. Whereas if you work in an office, if you work in another job, if you're a teacher, if you work in the NHS, you've got a little bit of protection. You've got unions to help you. You've got, you know what I mean? Whereas the football, you could be out of work and out of job overnight, and that's probably the cutthroat thing. But what comes with it is, like Will said, that the highs, you know what I mean, the money, just everything what comes with it is the reward for me. You know what I mean? It overrides a risk, and it always did for me. And it was more of a reward to play football. Loved it. Loved the playing in front of people. You can't beat it. You know what I mean? There was one thing that I could turn the clock back. I would probably love to enjoy games more and enjoy that crowd, because when it's gone, and you can never get that back ever.
So Willie Craig asked on this subject, he says, how did Dave Jones release you? Did he speak to you directly, or did he do the same as what he did to Andy and banish you?
No, I went for a meeting. I met him in the office, and I remember talking to him, and he more or less said that, you know, he actually said the staff were split, that a couple of the staff wanted to keep me, and a couple felt it was the right time for me to leave. And I said, listen, I understand this is difficult and this whole conversation. And he actually said it's not difficult really to speak to an older pro. It's more difficult to speak to a younger lad who hasn't got met it in the game yet and hasn't played games. So it was all amicable. It was all okay. It was all sound. Shook hands. Said best of luck. I kind of knew it was coming, judging from what's happening previously in the months leading up. I had my house up for sale before I heard the news, to be honest with you. So I knew it was coming, but there was a split in the camp about keeping me on up. It was probably the right thing for everybody involved, because if I'd stayed there, I probably would have only been a bit part player, and after spending 7 years there playing quite a lot, I had a couple of injuries in the last season there. It probably wouldn't have suited either of us for me to stay for another season. It was the right time to move on, and as was proven over the next 2 or 3 years, the success the club had, the players that he got in as well, like, you know, so. I was delighted to see that, and there was no ill feeling really in the end.
Fair enough.
Which I think it's important, Si. I think it's important to say, you know what I mean, that when players leave and you have a really good time at a football club and you've got that affiliation with the supporters and the players who are still there and the staff and the club, that you want them to still do well, you know. And I think there's not many Cardiff players who played when I was there, and probably when Willie was there as well, that who still haven't got that affiliation with the club. You know what I mean? The lads who left didn't hold a grudge. The lads who left still go back. The lads who left still keep in touch with each other. And I think that's so important, because it shows how much togetherness we had as a group, as a player, and as a team. You know, I thought we were very strong on and off the pitch. Probably stronger off the pitch than we were on it, but that's probably a different story, to be honest.
No, I laughed at that. I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Cardiff. Great bunch of lads. I mean, I was there for seven seasons through the second division up to the first, up to the championship. You know, lucky enough to be involved in 2 promotions. You know, seeing the rise of the likes of Ernie, Ginge, Gabs, you know, Reese as well. All these boys getting Welsh caps, and then having the new players coming in like the likes of Cav and Tony having a big influence on the club. It was great times, and I can safely say all the boys that were there were great lads, really good lads. I mean, you don't get on with everybody, of course you don't. That's life. But in general, you know, the camaraderie between the group, you know, it was a good crack. It was, there was togetherness there, definitely. A fair bit of pressure for a couple of seasons as well, because we were under pressure because we'd spent a fair bit of money to perform and to get those promotions. But, you know, we got over the line in the end. But no, overall it was great times, and to be part of that kind of rise of the club up into the championship was brilliant, and it was great just to see him going into the Premier League afterwards.
Good stuff. So next up, we're going to do 2 Tell Me Whys. So in this, Willie, is I ask you and Andy both a question or give you a subject, and you've got 60 seconds to discuss it. as the guest, you get the opportunity to decide if you'd like to go first or second.
I'll go second, have a laugh off Andy first.
There we go. So I decided I was going to switch it up a bit this week. So we've got one question on the Euros and one question relating to Scottish football. So the first question or subject is how Robson-Kanu has been left out of the Welsh training squad ahead of the Euros. I'd like you to discuss it just for he's been in pretty good form for West Brom, but he has only played 19 games this year, 17 as a sub, and he's only scored 2 goals. But Andy Campbell, your 60 seconds starts now.
I'm sure, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure he said he retired from international football. So for me, it's for him to come back and tell everybody that he's available for selection again. I'm not sure if he has done. If he hasn't, I apologise.
I think he has. Yeah.
I think once you retire from me, you're done. You retire. You know what I mean? If you're going to come back, you're putting more pressure on yourself. You had an amazing tournament when Wales was successful. Do I think the Welsh football team's evolved? Of course I do. I think they've gone with a lot more freshness. They've got with a lot more pace. They're playing with a little bit more panache going forward. You know what I mean? With the way that they play, with probably the 3 behind the 1, and with the pace they got wide with Harry Wilson, with James, with Gareth Bale. You know what I mean? I think for me, I don't think he'll be a miss. I'll be perfectly honest. You know what I mean? I don't think he scored enough goals in the Premier League to warrant a 100% place. You know what I mean? I think he probably deserves to be in the training squad, but I'm not sure he warrants a place in the final 25-man squad, in my opinion.
Yeah, you had 1 second left, mate. Disgraceful. Just before Willie has his go, Reece makes a phenomenal point. He says, "Good. Hal Robson-Kanu retired from international football, and then returned straight after they qualified." And he said, "Reece thinks it's shocking that he had a call up when you've got all those young players as well who've got him there." So it's interesting, but let's hear what Willie Boland's got to say. Yeah, your 60 seconds start now, mate.
Well, I'd love to say I know a whole lot about this, to be honest with you, but I don't. First of all, you're saying that he's retired from international football, and has he been included in the squad?
No, so he retired, then came back after they qualified.
Right. Okay.
But then he's been left out of the squad now.
I think that's a pretty obvious one. He's been left out if he's retired and come back after qualification. I mean, he hasn't been part of the qualification process. He hasn't been playing an awful lot for West Brom. He's obviously hoping to get involved in that. As Camps has already stated, he did have a decent tournament the last time they were there. I remember scoring a super goal. So from that point of view, he could have been possibly considered from an experience point of view and an extra striker with Premier League experience. But I suppose the whole context of the situation, having retired and then coming back as the qualified, kind of leaves, other lads have been there from the very start on the sidelines if he was going to be considered to actually go there. So it's probably the right decision, in my opinion.
And that's just 60 seconds. See, Andy, that's
great show.
You finish on 60 seconds. Bang on.
He must have a timer on there, because that was out of order, by the way. That was proper bang on.
Literally,
you know what? And that's probably a take on it that you is probably an obvious take on it, but you need that little bit of time to probably digest it and think about it. That what makes his decision worse for me is that he thinks he can just come into it after missing a full qualification. You've got the lads who go there. I'd feel disrespectful to my teammates and my friends and ex-colleagues that I think I can just walk in and take one of their places, because that's what he's going to do, or someone's going to do, is take their place.
All right, to play devil's advocate, could it be possible that he retired thinking, obviously he came off the back of that incredible tournament in France and he scored that famous goal. He was at a certain age, he wanted to focus on his league game, and then maybe 6 months down the line or whatever, he thought, maybe I've jumped the gun a bit here. We don't know what discussion he had with the manager and the coaches and stuff in relation to that. Whilst I agree with you guys, and I agree with what Reece just said, that to me he should be nowhere near the squad, but also I don't think he should be near the squad on form and quality. I think there's better players.
I agree.
But
I agree.
They have got a young squad. Could he be a good, experienced backup to the likes of Kiefer Moore in case of an injury or suspension where you haven't got to chuck in a younger player?
Listen, there's pros and cons for everything, in my opinion. You know what I mean? For me, if Kiefer's going to play centre forward and lead the line on his own, and Gareth's going to play behind, one of the three behind, for me, if Kiefer gets injured, I'd put Gareth up there straight away anyway, and I'd bring somebody else behind with pace and who's got a threat, because is Robson Carnham gonna change your game? You know what I mean? Is he that good? How many games has he changed for West Bromwich Albion this season? How many games has he changed? You know what I mean? Throughout the last couple of years, not many. You know what I mean? So in my opinion, I'd say no. I'd rather have Matty James if he's not playing and he's coming on, because he's a game changer. You know, Harry Wilson, game changer on his day. You know what I mean? For me, there's more game changers than him.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on. I was going to put it to you anyway, Willie. I was going to say, like Will says there, that Levitt and Smith have barely played in League One this season, but they've both been picked. Obviously, younger players, but I don't know. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because managers will pick who they like at the end of the day.
But you can see the training as well, Will, can't you? Yeah. Sorry, Will. I think with those young lads, for example, I think they're there for training and for experience. They won't be in the final squad. I don't think. I think they're there to gain experience. Whereas if you're going to drop a player from that training squad, you're best off dropping a younger player than dropping a high-profile player and making the news. And I'll use the England squad a few years ago when he was dropping some of the big hitters. You know what I mean? It made the big news. It took the onus away from the tournament for me. You know what I mean? And that's what Wales don't want, especially what's going on with Giggs and Robert Page and the management. What's going on? You know what I mean? For me, they need to keep the focus on the pitch. The focus has got to be the team, because the management at the minute is a mess.
Yeah. What do you think, Will?
I think they've done it. I think they've done ever so well to qualify, first and foremost. I think it's great, especially obviously with the eruptions that's going on behind the scenes. So that for them is brilliant. I can see what Robson Carney was doing. You know, he's an experienced lad in opposed to some of the boys that are going to be in the squad. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know a whole lot about the Welsh squad, but from his point of view, what he's probably done here is he's had a look at the situation. There's a major championship coming up. You know, as you said, Sonia, he probably didn't think that they would qualify. They're qualified now. He's probably just put himself there in the window that if anybody was to get injured, like a decent first-team player or somebody on the fringes on the forward line, that he is an option to bring into the squad. Maybe he didn't expect to go into the squad straight away, but at least he's making it known that he's available if needed.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. Rye says this is a question for us all. He says, should they be looking at Luke Jeffcott, who scored 18 goals in League One? You know, years ago, Wales's squad was predominantly made up of Championship and League One players, whereas I think these days they have got a bit more quality about them. But he scored 18 goals this year. If you're manager, Andy, would you take him over someone like Hal Robson Carnham if you get a couple of injuries?
You've got a lad on form. Listen, he's playing for Plymouth Argyle, and he's played 41 games this season. You know what I mean? Plus 40 games. He's played every single game, I believe. You know what I mean? So why wouldn't you play a lad who's fit? He's confident. He's flying. He's young, 21-year-old. You know what I mean? He's got nothing to lose. It would be such a buzz for him to be playing. It would be. He'd run through a brick wall for his country. You know what I mean? You can just see it. Whereas I don't know. You know what I mean? People, for me, Carney went out on the swan song in the last tournament. He had a great tournament. He's had a wonderful career, and for me, I would have left it there personally, and I wouldn't have brought it back into it. But now it's going to be more of a disappointment for him that he hasn't been called up to this. And you know what I mean? Is he going to retire again, or is he just going to leave it?
Not many players get to retire on a high point or at the top, do they? And I think that could have been, from an international point of view, he probably should have left it there.
Well, on everything side, you know what I mean? We had James Coppinger on the show, you know what I mean? One amazing guest, and obviously Cops retired this season and retired on his terms, obviously over 40-year-old, which is amazing, but he's done it on his terms, and there's not many people who retire from football and from international football on their own terms after such a high, you know what I mean? So for me, it would have been an amazing thing to be invited to come back in and just say, listen, I've done my job. I can pass it on to the younger people now who've just qualified with you. So let's just move on. But everyone to their own.
Yes, it's an interesting one, mate. And the second question, I liked it. I thought it was a good discussion. This one's a good discussion point as well. There's rumours that Eddie Howe is going to be announced as this new Celtic manager in the next 24 hours. And I want to know, what does Celtic need to do to get back on terms with Rangers? Because they looked a long way off this year. Probably last year as well. I felt that Celtic were quite fortunate in the end. I felt like Rangers lost it rather than Celtic won it. But Rangers have, they've trounced it this year. They've done very well. They've beaten them several times. What does Celtic need to do to get back on level terms? Andy Campbell, your 60 seconds start now.
Celtic need to really freshen things up. They've gone stale, I believe, especially this season. You know what I mean? For the first season, they've had somebody against them. You know what I mean? Rangers have been fantastic this year. They've gone a different style of play. Stevie's obviously put his marker down, and his philosophy of attacking play and his something with his midfield and his wide players have been absolutely fantastic. And that's what Celtic need to go back to. They need to go back to probably a big signing or some fast attacking players. I remember when Sean Maloney was playing, when Henrik Larsson was playing, Chris Sutton, John Hartson, Roy Keane. They had an unbelievable setup. You know what I mean? They need to go back to the good times, and it's just got to be consistent. That if you've had a bad couple of games, don't start sacking managers. Don't start looking at the doom and gloom. Yes, the Rangers haven't lost this season, but they're going to lose next season. And will that make Stevie G a bad manager? It won't. And let Eddie Howe come in. Let him put his philosophy in of passing football and attractive, playing out from the back, and putting it into the Scottish League and see how it goes, because he's a fantastic young manager. And I believe he'll put them back where they need to be.
It's just 60 seconds. So that's interesting. Interesting. You went over, mate. It wasn't perfect. Come on now. Okay. Willie Boland, 60 seconds on what does Celtic need to do to get back on terms with Rangers. Your time starts now.
Yeah, and listen, first of all, I think Eddie Howe will be a great appointment. Celtic will be a great appointment for him as well. It seems to be a decent stepping stone for managers trying to get back into the game, have a bit of success to get back into the Premier League, as Brendan Rodgers has proven there already. I think Eddie Howe is a super young manager. I think that he'll bring a freshness to the club. I think Rangers had the momentum over the last couple of seasons of inching closer to Celtic and then overtaking them. I think when Stevie Gerrard came in, he put his footprint on the club and put what he wanted and his philosophy into practice. Celtic and Rangers have got the best players, the best budget in Scotland. They always will do. It's a two-horse race most of the time. With Aberdeen or Dundee United, all Eddie Howe has got to do is just bridge that gap and bring a couple of fresh new players into the club and a bit more momentum, and I can see them overtaking Rangers again.
Excellent. 5 seconds to go that time. That's pretty good. I'll take that. I think, Andy, I thought you made a good point actually about them being stale. They've looked, particularly this year, looked very stale. And I agree with Willie, like Eddie Howe, I think is about as good an appointment as they could make. But
Willie also made a good point, Si, about Brendan Rodgers. You know what I mean? When I'm talking about stale, I'm on about a manager who's probably been there too long. And Neil came back. And he's done a great job, by the way, at Celtic, Neil Lennon. He's done an amazing job. He's won so many trophies.
Go back, don't they?
Yeah, and he probably went there to stabilise what was happening, and he wanted to push him onto another level. But he wasn't working with the same players. He wasn't working with the same kind of budget as what he's previously worked at. He's buying players from, and I'm not being disrespectful, he's buying people from Motherwell, and he's buying the best players. Of course, he's in Motherwell's side, and St Johnson's team and Aberdeen's players. But he's used to getting players from the Premier League. He's used to getting the Roy Keanes. He's used to getting the Henrik Larssons. He's used to getting Chris Sutton and John Hartson. That's a big difference, you know what I mean? So when he's working with those kind of players, the manager himself, you know what I mean? Imagine Roy Keane, you know what I mean? I was lucky enough to play against Roy Keane and the Celtic boys when I was down in Dunfermline, and listen, it was a joke, I'll be honest. It was that easy for them. It wasn't even close, you know what I mean? 8-1, I think they beat us 1 week, and 3-0 the following week in the cup final. And it was just a walk in the park, but it now looks like a struggle, you know. You've got all these young Scottish footballers who are playing for the national team, and it looks a struggle for them. And they're playing in front of no fans, and you know what I mean? If Celtic Park is rocking 60,000 fans at home to Rangers and you're losing, you're probably going to know about it. So I think they need to get themselves back. They need a good manager, fans to back it, and I think they'll be fine. I believe Eddie Howe will just turn them right around with his own staff as well.
Yeah, indeed, mate. I think it's been interesting. They got to back him. That was the other thing, mate. Because is it to sort of go off the same point, same subject, but different point slightly. St Johnstone won both the cups in Scotland. Is there any chance that they can challenge Celtic and Rangers for that top 2 place? Because
St Johnstone,
yeah, we've seen it for so long.
No, the only team for me, in my opinion, and I do keep an eye on Scottish football for various reasons, and the only team who's probably going to be close is Aberdeen, and I believe their budget's been slashed, and They brought in Stephen Glass as new manager. He was at Atlanta last year. He's supposed to be very good coach, very good manager from the job he did in Atlanta too last year. He brought Scott Brown with him. So they look like they're trying to close the gap a little bit, but the gap's that big. It's just ridiculous, you know. I don't see anybody closing it in the foreseeable.
No, I think it's going to be difficult for anyone unless they was to get like a big fund, a big owner with a lot of cash. Just because the funding difference, the TV rights, even just the TV rights paid to Celtic and Rangers are so much bigger than what the rest of the clubs get. There's always going to be a gap. There was a couple of years back, I think Aberdeen had a really good, like 3 or 4 players come through the academy. But the problem is they have one good season and you think, oh, hang on about. If these can stay together and they could pick up a couple of good transfers, they could be here. So, and then Rangers and Celtic take all the young players and they're gone. And they got to start again. And I think that's almost impossible to stop.
Well, Donna's just made a good point there about, do you remember when Aberdeen were the top team in Scotland? Obviously, Fergie was a manager.
The 80s.
They brought in they had some younger players. They brought people through. They sold them on. They went to the Premier League. A lot of the young Scottish players in England, especially in the 2000s and to 2010, they came through probably the Aberdeen ranks because the Celtic and Rangers players stayed where they were, and the Aberdeen players and the Hibs players jumped ship and came down south. And that's what intrigued me when I potentially nearly went there. That they had young players, so it was probably a natural progression to go to a club who enhances young players to put them back down south, and it was just too far for me. It was just saying that Cardiff was even further, but it was just it was a 5-mile camel ride to get there. It was a nightmare.
But Willie, it's got to be difficult for Scottish teams outside of Rangers and Celtic when, as soon as you get a half decent player, particularly the younger players, as soon as you get someone who's half decent and starts performing in the first team, Rangers and Celtic come along and pick them up. And if they don't pick them up, you have Championship clubs and League One clubs come and pay them more to go and play in England. Like, that must be frustrating for the clubs, the fans, but also difficult for the coaches as well.
Well, that's what happened with Adam Rooney when it will. Was it Adam Rooney? Is that right?
Yeah, he was at Aberdeen, wasn't he? Yeah, he was at Aberdeen.
He went to the conference to sign for Salford.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's always going to be a problem. Celtic and Rangers have created such a gap there over the last 30 years. Aberdeen were very good when Fergie was there, but they were lucky to have 3 or 4, 5 really good young players coming through. But that squad was tore apart by the likes of Man United signed in Jim Leighton and Gordon Strachan. You had McLeish moving on as well to Rangers. And Willie Miller said it for years. But that's what happens, if there's a team who are progressing and young players coming through, they're going to grab attention from clubs who've got bigger budgets, bigger fan base, bigger stadiums, more money, bigger budget. So what's going to happen to those players? Heads are going to get turned. Those lower clubs need money to survive. It turns into something similar to the Premier League, where you've got the top 6 or 7 who will ultimately buy the best players from those teams that are in the mid-table lower. Look at the advantage. Southampton is more or less a feeder club to Liverpool over the last 5 or 6 years. That's what most clubs are based upon, is can they get good young players from the lower leagues? Can they bring good young players through? Can they get an element of success? What's an element of success? Staying in the Premier League, getting a good cup run, getting into Europe and selling players on for a huge profit. That's the nature of the beast, really.
I totally agree. Totally, absolutely.
Sorry, Andy, I was just going to say, you mentioned Adam Rooney, mate. He went to Salford in League 2 because they doubled his wage. That really, and Reece just brought that up, but that shows how poor the finances for the teams outside Celtic and Rangers are, even compared to League 2 clubs. Like, I know Salford is slightly different to other League 2 clubs, but even so, a League 2 club is able to double his wage. Not many people, let alone footballers, are going to turn down a double your money offer to move jobs. Do you know what I mean? That's a lot of difference to your life, isn't it?
Especially the standard of football he was playing at. You know what I mean? Because he was playing in big stadiums. He was playing in Europe. He was playing against Celtic and Rangers, 8 times a season. Potentially playing in big cup games. And then he's dropping down to League 2, where the stadiums, the facilities, the training grounds, everything's less. Everything's not as good. You know what I mean? So it must be a difficult choice. You know what I mean? And I'm not being arrogant. You know, I'm not taking a mick. That I think, you know what I mean. For me, sometimes yes, the money's great, but sometimes you've got to weigh up all the options and weigh up the things of, if I have a good couple of seasons at Aberdeen, that Celtic could buy me. You know what I mean? For example, because that's been happening as well. And Willie mentioned there about all the guys who left Aberdeen to go to Man United. It's just, and that's the natural progression, though, wasn't it? You know, because how would you turn that down? Those opportunities don't come around very often. You know what I mean? And those opportunities come around once in a lifetime. You take them, because once you turn them down, it's the biggest regret of your life. You know what I mean? You look at some of the players who have turned those kind of moves down, and you don't do it. You know what I mean? And that's just an amazing thing. Willie mentioned someone. He mentioned Jim Layton. I played in Jim's testimonial. Remember talking to Kev about it. That was that was quality. That
Jim.
He's broke up a bit there.
The thing about it, though, if you look back in the 80s and if you look at the European competitions when it wasn't so much Champions League, Scottish teams did pretty well, and the Scottish League and the English League was. Sorry, am I still there now?
No, yeah, good.
I'm just saying, in the 80s, the Scottish and English League they weren't a million miles apart. Even the internationals between Scotland and England were pretty close. The Premier League now has installed so much finances into the English game that the gap between the English game and the Scottish game is huge. It's a massive gap now, and it's only Celtic and Rangers who really can financially, get decent players in.
But what it's done there, Si, it's encouraged teams to put the finances back into the youth team and bring young players through. You look at how successful England's 16s have been. The 19s won the World Cup. The 21s are always successful. The full squad's starting to be successful because players are playing all around the world, and that's probably. And I'm talking about Germany. They're playing in other countries because they're not playing in England because of the standard of players playing in England. You know what I mean? Because the Premier League is that big now that English players are playing all over the world, whereas Scottish players, yes, the best ones are playing in England, Robertson, etc. But the other lads are playing regular football in Scotland, but the standard's not as high. You know what I mean? But to be fair, saying that, the national team's picked up and they're in the Euros, and you're only as good as your last game. And obviously they play England in the group, so I'm not gonna count my chickens just yet. But I'd be disappointed if we didn't beat them.
Well, Andy, look, I just quickly on Adam Rooney, mate. It's a bit just you were saying about the quality in the English leagues. He played 151 games for Aberdeen, scored 66 goals. Then he went to Salford, played 70 games and scored 30 goals, which is pretty good. It's like almost a goal a game. And he's now playing. He's only 30. He's only 33, but he's playing for Solihull Moors at the moment. Which I think, what league are they in, mate? Do you know?
They're in the National League. He's playing Cameron Cox. Yeah.
So like it's a strange one, isn't it? It shows how much quality there is, because he's in before he went to Solihull. He had a pretty good record, like in those seasons. You know, it's a strange one, but there we go. There was a question which I really liked just now. I'm trying to find it. There we are. Rob Boyle asked Willie, was there a player that you ever played against that you loved to leave a foot on in the tackle?
See, I think people think that I'm some sort of dirty player in the whole lot. I'm not. There's a skill in tackling as well, you know. And I would never go out to hurt people. I'd always go and be fully committed. Never really came across anybody who. I tell you, it's the truth. It's the truth. I never come across anybody who I intentionally would go out and try and hurt. Body really. I tell you who I didn't really like, to be honest with you. There was a couple of players who I played against who I thought were who I could have done or should have done. Dennis Wise was one of those. Paul Ince, those type of players. They were kind of naggy. Always trying to give it the big one. You know, always trying to wind you up. If there was any players I wouldn't mind going through, would be players like that, to be honest with you. You get them. But no, not not anybody that springs to mind to them.
See, I think that's I think it's a good question though, because there's players who wind you up, there's players who annoy you, there's players who frustrate you, and there's one that comes to mind for me, and it wasn't a direct player who were playing against. You know what I mean? So it wasn't anyone who was marking me. It was when we played for Crystal Palace, and I'm going to use the Crystal Palace terminology because he plays for Swansea now, and I don't want it to look like I'm picking on Swansea again, and people thinking that I don't like Swansea, because that's not the truth. Wayne Routledge. Wayne Routledge used to wind me up all the time, and he used to. I don't know if it was just because he was little and he used to just get round me very quickly, and he was very quick, and it was just annoying to be around. You know what I mean? And very good player. He had the ability in abundance, but he just seemed to be everywhere where I didn't want him to be, and he just really got on my nerves every time. So, but if you want to come on the show, Wayne, doors open.
Yeah, doors open, doors open. But yeah, so it is what it is. Oh. Right, Willie was back now.
Willie gone. But listen, that's we'll go back to Adam Rooney. Goal scorers cost money, Si. You know what I mean? So for a League One club and a League Two club not to take a risk on Adam, you know what I mean? That Solihull must be doing something right and contributing quite a hefty sum to his wages, because goal scorers are few and far between. You know, which is. It's true, back. I really, 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 really like them, and they're in the playoff final as well. So, I've just bought me Brentford top.
We're not talking about that until Friday. Well done, Newport, by the way. They tried to bottle it.
Cracker.
They tried their best, but they did.
Yeah, cracker. Cracker. The thing is, they've got enough quality, experience quality. You know what I mean, on the bench, through the squad, through the coach and stuff. Flinny's done a tremendous job, and I hope they go up just for him, because if they don't, I think somebody else might have a little nibble and try and prize him away, because there's some big clubs in League Two and there's some bigger clubs in League One. So if they're not careful and he doesn't make that progression, he might make it with somebody else, which will be a huge shame, because he's made so much progress at a football club side, and if they don't continue that progress, they can fall backwards and then have to start again. And I don't think they've got the facilities, probably haven't got the finance to do it, so sometimes you can punch above your weight, and it's going to be a tough one. They've got a tough game against Morecambe, because Morecambe are a decent side. They beat Tranmere, so it'll be a good luck to them, by the way. Hope they do it.
And Gav said earlier, he said, do you remember when there was always talk about Celtic and Rangers coming to the Premier League? Like, they're just not, I just don't believe they're anywhere near that level, mate. I know we've talked about it before, but just while I wait for Willie, they're nowhere near that level. I didn't even think they're championship level sometimes.
Well, there's a few points. You know what I mean? For me, the first point is what give them the divine right to go straight in the Prem. You know what I mean? That there's got to be a level for them to go into. If I was a Rangers player, I wouldn't expect to go to League Two and have to work up, but I'd expect to at least have to earn the right to get in the Premier League. So that would be Championship. But then if I'm a Championship club or a League One club, I'm not looking at Rangers and Celtic thinking, hang on a minute, why are you taking our place? You know what I mean? So it's a difficult one. But for me, the minute, they're nowhere near. If you're talking about when Rangers had Laudrup, they had Gaza, they had Ali McCoist, and when you're talking about Celtic and you're talking about John Hart and Roy Keane, etc.
Joe Ledley.
We're talking about a different, Joe Ledley, etc. We're talking about a different kettle of fish. You know what I mean? We're talking about a different setup, a different side. So now, no, back in the pond, maybe they had a great chance. But then they were teams in Europe as well. So.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, big time. Ryan, Reese, and a couple of other people have mentioned Kevin Ellison, because you said about the playoffs. He's coming up against Derek Adams again. I wonder what will happen if he scores a goal. Will he go face to face with him again, or what do you reckon?
Listen, Kev's a winner. Kev's a winner. Kev's a winner. Kev will just want to win. He showed his passion. He did what he did because he thought it was the right decision to do, and. You know what I mean? I spoke to him straight after, the day after, and he didn't regret it and said that he would do it again. So I'm fully expecting it.
Willie, Ian just asked a question. He's asked it a couple of times. I know we talked about you leaving Cardiff earlier, but he asked specifically, he said, ask Willie about his time leaving Cardiff and why, please. There was so much stuff being said at the time about bonuses and other talk on the terrace. And he's just wondering if that was anything to do with it, or was it a purely football decision?
No, it was purely a football decision. I mean, the year before, I took a massive wage cut because the club were, I think Peter Ridsdale was in the club at the time, and financially the club were struggling a little bit at that stage. So, no, it was purely football. There was not offered. David Jones had more or less just said that, it's probably time to move on. And that was it, really. So, no, the financial side of things never came into it. The year before, I had to take a cut, as I just mentioned there. And there was a little situation as well where an amount of games, if I'd played the previous season, you would get a bonus as well. But I conveniently was left out of 2 or 3 games towards the end of the season. They brought me back for the last 4 games when we needed to get some results, which we did. Thankfully, we got 8 points out of the last 4 games. But the previous 2 or 3 games, I'd come back from injury, and I was on the bench and never got on the pitch, sort of thing. But that's, at the time, the club financially were struggling a little bit. They brought Dave Jones in, obviously, and they had to move things around a little bit. Or so they said. They were financially struggling a little bit. But no, not when I left. When I left, it was not to do with that.
Yeah, that's got to be frustrating, man, though, to be left out, and when you feel like it's because of a performance-based thing in your contract rather than, being.
Well, I can't say for certain that was the case, but
yeah,
I would have imagined, towards the end of the season, Cav had left to go to, was it Wigan at the time? I think it was.
Yeah.
And I'd been out injured since Christmas time, and I was coming back, and the boys could have probably done it with a little bit of experience in there. I think Joe was just coming to prominence then, and he was doing well, in the middle of the park. But it got to the point where I think we lost 2 games in a row, and we were, dangerously close to the relegation. And they brought me back into the side. So it seemed at the time that could have possibly been the reason, but I wasn't really that bothered, to be fair, as long as we stayed up, which we did ultimately.
Unfortunately, it happens. I know it happened a couple of times at Cardiff during my time with players, and it happened at the weekend with Aidan McGeady. Aidan was going to trigger a new contract if he played against Lincoln City in the second game of the playoffs. If he'd have played, and he did play, but he waived his contract. He just tore his old contract up and signed a basically 1-week contract. I don't get it. For me, just why do clubs, if clubs aren't going to honour these things, then don't put them in. You know what I mean? Because for me, I look at Aidan McGeady, and Sunderland could and probably should have got promoted. You know what I mean? They've underachieved. Of course they have. However, what's going through a player's mind if he's not fully committed to the club? That is he going to go through a brick wall? Is he going to get stuck in because he doesn't want to get injured? Aidan surely doesn't want to get injured in the playoff semi-final because he's going to have to find a new club in the summer, and he's already been told that remotely that because you're not getting a new deal. I don't understand it. Basically, for me, it's not ethically right. If you're
but
going
it
to
also shows the sort of person he is. By the way,
mate, listen, for the player,
that he wanted to see
it's fabulous. Yeah, he did, and it was great from him, and he's been a model pro throughout his career, and I've seen him quite closely at Celtic when he was coming through, and I've kept an eye on him ever since, and he's been immense. And his time up in the northeast, he's been absolutely phenomenal, and I hope he doesn't retire. I hope he carries on for as long as he can, because he looks like he can play for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, 100%. Willie, Lee Crofts asks, who was the biggest drinker that you've ever played with?
Oh Jesus, there's loads. I could name a proper squad there, to be honest with you. I would say when I was at Coventry, there was some big drinkers there. Mickey Quinn, he's now a horse trainer at ex Newcastle, ex Portsmouth, Coventry City, famously known as Sumo Quinn. He could put it away. Paul Cook, who's turned out to be a successful manager with various clubs. He was a very good drinker. They were social lads, 2 Scousers. There was a few boys at Cardiff, could put it away as well. But honestly, we would go out once in a while. It wouldn't be like the old 80s days, 90s days. Well, I'd say 80s when they used to go out every Tuesday club or something like that. We used to have our get-togethers every so often. But the modern game now, especially, I don't think you can be as frivolous with the old drink as you could years ago. But no, listen, there was some boys who could put it away. The older pros, when I was a young lad, it was pretty it was pretty popular back then. But as I went through my career, I got less and less. There used to be drink on the buses coming back from away games. That was done away with as time moved on. But that was the old tradition years ago. I'd have a couple of cans on the bus on the way back from away games, and there was some heavy drinkers there, all right. But it definitely kind of waned off as the years progressed. And I would be very surprised if there's anything sort of like that at all now, to be fair.
Oh. How important though is it, Willie, then to use for team morale, team bonding, so to speak? Because that's how it used to happen back in the day. You know what I mean? I remember coming through '96 that it would be straight out on a Saturday. The manager would call it on a Sunday to get everyone back together in the pub and do it all again. You know what I mean? Because that's just how it was. That he saw if you were together on a Sunday and you were together on a Saturday, then training and games were easy because you knew each other inside out. You'd work for the person next to you, your mate. I don't see that sometimes now. You know what I mean? And clubs have to try and find that way of building that morale and that team bonding together. And I'm not sure how they do it now.
You know, I mean, I definitely buy into it because I think it's beneficial as long as you're not taking the piss with it, like, and going out too often. Once in a while, definitely, I think it's you're right. It's good for team bonding, but just different animals now. The players, you know, they're a lot more physically fit. The demands of the game are a lot more. Everyone's quicker, faster, stronger. You get alcohol in your system now. It takes you a couple of days to recover from it. You can't do it. You just can't do it. These boys are getting paid an awful lot of money to perform week in, week out. And they got to look after themselves. Years ago, it was accepted. It was part of the culture. It was part of the camaraderie, part of people, you know, coming together as a group. The older pros would, as a tradition, obviously try and get people together and get out, and it worked. It did work. There's no denying that. It did work getting people together who wouldn't normally get together. But I just don't think they can do it now.
No, I agree.
In a controlled environment, maybe once or twice a season, possibly, but not like every week like they might have done years ago.
But I think that's also social media as well, and we've spoken. And listen, I'm so pleased it wasn't around because it would have got me into all sorts of trouble. And I just think it's a godsend. But I think that's a deterrent in its own right that it's not there. You know what I mean? All it takes is someone taking a photo of you at the wrong time at the wrong place, and you look like you've had 25 pints. Where you know what I mean? I seen a story about Ross Barkley the other day, and he was getting asked to leave a hotel. Apparently he's been on the drink all day, and he was walking out. But because someone's got their arm on his back, it looks 10 times worse. And you know what I mean? It's a story and it sells papers, and I get that. I fully understand that. But camera phones are the worst invention ever.
Yeah. Did either of you two ever play for Cardiff? Go on, sorry, Willie. Go on.
Say that. I was going to say, to be fair, Cams, I seen that clip of Ross Barkley. He was.
He was, yeah. He was, but you on about you used to say it there about a highly tuned athlete, about players. I bet now it doesn't take a player now that long to get as drunk as probably it used to take one of us back in the day when you can have 8, 9, 10 pints. You know what I mean? Whereas like now, because just the way the bodies are made now, because they're so fit, they're so healthy, they're just finely tuned now. Whereas back in the day, you just had to get through a game. That's all you had to do, and you did it because you had to. You didn't have much choice.
Yeah.
Well, it was when someone got arrested recently, didn't they? A footballer for drink driving on the way back from the end of season drinks. I can't remember which one it was now. Oh, that'll come to me in a minute. Donna said, "Did either of you ever play for Cardiff hungover?"
I didn't play for Cardiff hungover. I've never played a professional game hungover. I've said on here publicly, obviously when Chris Wilder was my manager at Halifax Town, that we were having a really tough time, and Chrissy took us out for a couple of pints before an away game at Aldershot, which we unfortunately won 1-0, which was the worst possible result, because the next week when we did it again, we got absolutely walloped. I think 5 or 6, which we never did it again. But it was just. You just can't do it, you know what I mean? And yes, it was only 2 pints, but I felt it, and I was feeling it the last 20-30 minutes of the game, and it was just somewhat of a slog. I did it a couple of years ago when, after a Christmas do, I was playing for a local team called Stokesley at probably step 9 with a good friend of mine who was a manager, and I shouldn't have played, but I just did it because I thought it was going to be funny, and it was a mistake, to be honest. Embarrassed myself and embarrassed everybody else as well, I think.
Good effort. Guys, you go on, Will.
I was just going to say, you couldn't do it at a professional level. It's just just wouldn't do that.
No.
It never entered the equations. Don't get me wrong, I might have turned up training once or twice after having a couple of beers on a Sunday, but before a game, no, not a chance.
Once or twice.
Good shot. Gaz says, Willie, he says, tell us a story about Andy off the pitch, and how does it feel to know you contributed to Si being with his wife? Well, let's just hear a story about Andy off the pitch, I think, because we've heard the other story.
Yeah, well, I use room with Camps quite a lot. When we used to go on away trips, and we went through this phase where we'd play FIFA quite a lot.
I knew this was coming.
And Cams would say that I'm a bad loser and the whole lot. Like, I'm not actually. I'm just like really determined. But you should see this lad when he loses games at FIFA. He's unbelievable. He starts throwing the remote control all over the room and stuff like that, banging it on the ground and the whole lot. He won't talk to you for about 20 minutes afterwards. And I'm just sitting there kind of smirking and smiling away to myself, knowing that he's wound up. I used to love it. Absolutely love it.
I'll be honest.
I wouldn't be the greatest FIFA player now. I wouldn't be the greatest FIFA player, but he beat me his fair share of times. But those other occasions when I would beat him, it felt good, like, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I knew that was coming, so I was prepared for it. I'm a really bad loser. I'll be honest. I just don't like it. I think it, and I probably blame my junior football for that. You know what I mean? That when you brought up, and I'm going to move into a point about Willie in a minute, and upbringing in football. That when you're brought up in a team which is so successful and you win all the time, it's a nightmare. So when, you know what I mean, I think losing's healthy, losing's good. It gets you so used to it, because you've got to have that feeling. You've got to know how to handle it to prepare for your next game, and it's so important. And I probably try to tell myself that now after spitting my dummy out 12 times a night when I used to play for Willie. But yeah, we had some great trips, by the way. Every trip was a great trip. On the bus, in the hotel, it was quality, and it was amazing times. But one thing and I've just spoken there about young players and upcoming players and coming through. Obviously, you were brought up in Ireland. And the amount of players who came through, probably your era-wise, Irish players, especially Republic of Ireland. Why is it that many players came through at that kind of time? Because they all seemed to. There was an influx of players who came over to the UK to play, and the standard was absolutely ridiculous of players. And so, why is that? Is it still coming through now? Is the standard still as high, or was the coaching or the development at the time extremely high?
No, I think what it was, and it stems down to how the English game has evolved, really. I think the players that you're getting back over from Ireland in my area were all international players. You know, you were getting the best of Ireland, really. And what you were doing, you were putting those into various different English clubs. And we would do just as well as English players, because we probably had the same sort of upbringing, exposure to football. Totally different now with the academy system and the amount of exposure English players get at such a young age, and the standard of coaching and the amount of contact that they get on the football. We're way behind over here, and that's why there's less and less players, younger players, going to England, which will even be harder now again with the Brexit situation. So what you find now is that it's players that are a little bit older who've got a bit more experience in the League of Ireland. Your 18, 19-year-olds that clubs are taking a chance on now, where they've been exposed to first-team football, rather than the younger ones who are up against younger lads who are miles ahead of them, simply because of the facilities and the coaching and the contact time that they've had on the football. And that's why you see all these brilliant young English players coming through at the moment. It's great for the English game. I think the academy system, a lot of people have obviously criticised it, but if you know the numbers before you go into it, you know the experience that you're going to get, you know you're going to improve as a footballer, then you can accept the plus points, which is you're getting the players like Phil Foden coming through, who you never see really. You know, people mention Gaza, but technically English players now are just as good as European players, where you couldn't say that 15, 20 years ago.
No, I totally agree. But I'm going back to probably what I must have been 14, 15-year-old, and we went to the Milk Cup, and the standard of that tournament alone. You know what I mean? Is it still going now? Is the standard still big? Is it being taken over by clubs, or is it? What is it? Is it still high?
There's some good players. There's still some very good players here. and there always will be. You'll always get your odd few who you feel could obviously make an impact over England. But I'll go back to the point: they haven't had the same exposure as 9-year-old, 10-year-olds as they do in England. It's so much more professional now in England than what it was years and years ago, which is why we would be on a level playing field. There's some quality players over here, really good technical players, and the Irish game is trying to improve all the time. The youth system is trying to improve all the time, of course, as it just doesn't have the financial backing. The clubs don't have the support, they don't have the sponsorship, they don't have the TV exposure, and that's where we're miles behind. So, if I'm a young Irish player now, I'm looking at the situation thinking, how am I going to get to England? It's far more difficult now than what it was years ago. I was lucky at that period of time that there was a conveyor belt of Irish players going over, so clubs were looking at Irish players because of that. Whereas you don't see that as much now, simply because the English game, the English academy system has progressed so much.
So is there then a progression for them, Will, then, or is a stop now? You know what I mean? Because is there a natural progression for anybody?
There is. We got a national league here under 13s, 15s, 17s, and 19s, which is in line with international football. Our younger international teams are doing pretty well. They get the major final tournaments, the major tournament finals, should I say? A lot of them do go over to England. But you just don't see, like most young players now, you don't see them impacting first teams as you would do years ago. And you don't see them coming to prominence. You look at the Irish international team now, and it's been fairly criticised a lot. But there's a lot of young players have to come through yet. And I would hope you'll see the fruits of what people are trying to do back here in the next 5 years or so, 5 to 6 years, where we started a little bit later than the English system did. So we're probably about 10 years behind. So you'd hope to see some of those young players coming through now, making impacts in first teams and at an international level as well. Like
and
I
just
said, financially.
last question then on that then, Will, sorry to butt in, because I think it's going to be a point then what you're probably going to move on to. Is that having an impact on the national team? Because the national team's really struggling currently. You know what I mean? You see Northern Ireland are probably overtaking them with results. England, Scotland, Wales, you know what I mean? Because they're really struggling, and I'm not really sure why, because previously they've done really well.
Yeah, well, for me, it's pretty straightforward. We don't have enough players playing at the highest level. We don't have enough quality players that are playing for Ireland at this moment in time. You look back to when we qualified for the World Cups and European Championships, most of our players played for the top 4 or 5 clubs in England. We don't have that now, and that's where we're at. There's a lot more English players coming through, a lot more European players playing with top teams in the Premier League, and our lads are really, playing possibly low Premier League to Championship level, League One level. And it's probably what you mentioned about Wales there a while back. That's where we're at the moment, where a lot of our players are playing down there at those levels rather than at the higher levels. And we need to try and get back. But we're hoping that our younger players will progress and improve and will start climbing that ladder in the English leagues, which will impact, obviously, the international team in the future.
Yeah, great shout.
Stuff, good shout. A few questions from the live chat then. Some will require a longer answer than others, Willie. But Kay Child asked, what football team do you support?
I support Manchester United. Do I need to elaborate on that or just leave it at that?
Terrible.
No, I think it's a fantastic choice.
Terrible answer. It's a terrible answer. And do you know what, right? And I will back him up here, by the way, because this isn't just. This has been, I've known Will for obviously a very, very, very long time, and they weren't always successful. You know what I mean? And this is someone who's had an upbringing, and he talks about the players passionately, about the players when the things weren't going well. So it's always nice. It's always nice to get supporters who stick with the club through thick and thin. You know what I mean? Because football's good like that. You know what I mean? You get good times, but then you get really bad times, but then the good times hopefully might come back.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than people with 2 clubs, mate. They're like support Cardiff or Liverpool, but no, support Cardiff, isn't it? Just going to let that hang.
Can I?
Not about anyone in particular.
Can I elaborate here?
No,
you're going to elaborate now? You're not going to name names like.
Where did Man United finish in the league anyway?
Just behind Man City.
Second.
Oh, was it? All right. Okay. Who was third?
Was it Liverpool? I didn't really see that. I'm really seeing that.
You don't see it. No. Well, there we go. Next question. Gavin asked. He said, "What was the most or your favourite stadium you ever played in?"
Well, probably links in with my last answer. Really, Old Trafford. Being a lifelong Manchester United fan as a kid, and getting to I played there twice. I played there when they lifted the league in '94, last day of the season. So as a young kid supporting United and playing there when they lifted the league, that was a special occasion, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I'd say obviously the Millennium Stadium was. Yeah, Millennium Stadium was an amazing experience as well. The playoff final. That was the game. The game was crap, but the experience was brilliant.
Yeah.
What was special about Old Trafford, Will? Because the big stadiums sometimes get a little bit of a reputation for being probably less quiet. You know what I mean? Certain fans, you know what I mean? Man United fans, they've got something special. You know what I mean? They do sing. They do get behind the team, and the noise at Old Trafford when there's a goal is quite something. You know what I mean? I sampled that quite a lot. You know what I mean? Giving quite a few goals away at Old Trafford, so it's something that you get used to quite often when you play against some of the big sides. But you know what I mean? It's just something special when you hear that kind of noise.
No, it is. I mean that was an amazing occasion because they were league champions, and it was everyone was celebrating, and there was a party atmosphere going on. But you go to some of these grounds, these big grounds, and depending on how the game's going and how the team are actually performing, is going to depend on the atmosphere. If you go to a big team where they're struggling, that crowd can turn on them pretty quickly, and it can work in your favour. So it totally depends on how the match is going. Totally depends on how the team is doing that season. But I get what you're saying. The tight little grounds do create great atmospheres. But I just think, obviously, being a United fan from a young age and playing at Old Trafford, that was obviously kind of a dream come true sort of thing,
Well, you just said there about players, the fans turning. Obviously, we've had no fans. You know what I mean? So obviously, that's gonna change next season. Hopefully, that everyone will be back. And I'm going to use Old Trafford as an example. I'm going to use one player as an example, and I'd just like your opinion on it. And Greenwood's had an amazing season, but he's had an amazing season with no fans there. How's he going to react when he's got fans there and he makes a mistake and people potentially get on his back? Is he going to be the same player? Will he flourish even more when he's got fans there to entertain? How's his going to emotions feel during a game?
I don't think the fans will get on his back, to be honest with you. I think he's a Man United youngster coming through the ranks and the whole lot. They normally give them the benefit of the doubt and have a bit more patience. And I think a lot of fans have got common sense about him as well. They realise and understand that young players, need time, they need patience, and they tend not to get in their back. No, listen, that's not all fans. But these young players are learning their game. I think that he'll be embraced. I think he's going to be a super player. Whether he ends up top or plays from that right, depending on the way things go next season. But I would say that he'll embrace it. I think he's got that air of confidence about him. I think he's got that look about him of being a top player. I don't think he's got much to worry about, especially if he performs the way he's performing anyway.
Yeah. I agree. What you just said there, I think he's got an arrogance about him, but a good arrogance and a real confident arrogance about him that he knows he's a very good player. For me, he's Rashford Mark II. You know what I mean? And it's only going to be great for you. You spoke about English players. He's got to go to the Euros for me. You know what I mean? Because I can see them just having the red arrows all over the place and just swapping 3 for 3 and just everyone's going all over the place. It'll be a joy to watch if they can just get regular performances out of those kind of players. Because United are getting it, so why can't England get it?
100%, mate.
I think it's an exciting time for English football.
If they don't win this, I think this could be our one opportunity for me to win something for me.
I think the other historical big European national teams are not as good as they have been previously. The likes of Italy's and Holland's and Germany's. I'm not saying they're not good. I just don't believe they're as strong as a whole as they have been previously. Whereas England's got quite a deep squad of young quality players. So I think you're right, Andy. If they're going to do anything in a tournament, this is probably going to be their chance to do it. Andy's dad asked a good question. He said, "Hi, Willie. Great to see you. Who had the biggest influence on your career?"
Good question. Very good question.
He asked good questions, my dad. My dad, good questions.
I listen. There's loads of different people that have had influences on my career. The kind of player I was, I think I embraced the fact of just being left to my own devices. So, for instance, my father, when I was younger, didn't put any pressure on me at all. Wasn't one of those pushy parents. Just encouraged me and supported me without judging me on my performances. And then you've got to go through all the coaches and managers you've had all the way up, and you always take a little bit from them. And the players that you played with, you're learning all the time as a player, and even as a coach and a manager now, you're always learning. And if you think that you'll never stop learning, then you're probably missing a trick there. You're never going to improve. So my dad initially, for making me loving the game and not impacting my progression, and obviously along the way during my progression, all the coaches and managers had influences on me, sometimes negative, which I'd learn from, and but mostly positive. So taking bits and pieces from and players I played with as well, all that. So I've had numerous influences that along the way that's helped and supported me, and family as well is a huge one, of course.
Cool. A couple of people have just said, I wasn't aware of this, so you'll have to bear with me. A couple of people have just said that Spain have announced their squad, and for the first time ever, there's not one Real Madrid player in it. What do you think of
Ramos?
that, Andy? No
Yeah,
Ramos.
right, I heard that today. Yeah,
Really?
They're just looking no Sergio Ramos.
Well, to be honest, they're massively underachieved, though, haven't they? You know what I mean? Over the last probably season.
They'll finish second in the league by like 2 points, though.
No, not Real Madrid. I mean Spain.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So they're obviously, are they going down a different route? Have they gone down a younger route? So they're going for youth and giving this up as an example.
Squad.
Rodrigo.
Let's have a look. Sorry. Wolves forward Adama Traore and Leeds defender Diego Llorente is in the squad. Brighton keeper Robert Sanchez make up the Premier League players, as well as De Gea.
They won't win it.
It looks like they've got a bit of a mix of new players, and then a couple like Koke, and then they've got like Koke and De Gea, and they have got a bit of experience, but it does not look anywhere near the type of experienced side that they've put in. Like their midfield, like they got Busquets, who's obviously very experienced. The next kind of most experienced player in their midfield squad for me is probably Thiago from Liverpool, who I think is like early 20s, and he's all right. But I'm talking in experience of a tournament. Like I think you do need a couple of players who've been there, done it. They got a couple, Jordi Alba and Asca. I can't say his name. Asca from
But we're talking about a country though here who's evolved, aren't we? You know what I mean? You're on about David Villa. You're on about Xavi's, Busquets, Ramos, Puyol, Casillas. You know what I mean? They were stalwarts. They played every single game for years and years and years. They won World Cups, European Championships. They had an amazing time. It's in a short period, so that was always going to come to an end, and then they had to restart again, because how can you bring you through when you've got quality like that and you're winning trophies and you're winning tournaments? It's impossible. France are potentially going to have the same problem and do the same thing. Portugal have had the same issue. They've had to regroup again and go down a younger route. Brazil have struggled. Argentina have never really done it. Holland are strong, but they've never been strong probably since Van Basten and Gullit and Koeman and all those guys. You know what I mean? England have struggled forever. So it's got to be someone else's time, you know what I mean? And I'm not going to feel sorry for Spain, by the way, because Spain have won everything for years. So I think it's about time someone else shared the trophy. Yeah,
and to clarify, Gavin's getting a bit annoyed with me. I wasn't saying Thiago is not very good. I was saying that he's quite young. So in terms of the central midfield, outside of Busquets, they haven't got any experience. Like I wasn't saying he's not very good. He just wouldn't get in.
Sav just texted me, said that Thiago's no good.
Well, he's not even. He's a poor man's Scott McTominay, isn't he? Let's be honest. What else we got? Kay Childs asked a question. I'm trying to find it because there's so many comments tonight. It's difficult.
His question was Willie. Who's your favourite ever Manchester United player?
There you
go. Between two, Brian Robson and Roy Keane. Played in my position and two super players.
Yeah. They didn't. I'd love to see both of them in their peak together. You know what I mean? I don't think. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Jesus.
We're talking about Vieira's and we're talking about Petit. Vieira and Petit were probably the best pairing. You know what I mean? At that time. But Keane and Robson together would have absolutely blew them away.
Yeah,
Definitely.
a couple of other questions we got. Geraint asked, what do you think of Cardiff City's new stadium, Willie?
I haven't been yet.
Lucky you. That's all
I
I would
haven't been
say.
yet. I'm going to have to... Why? What's wrong with it?
I prefer Ninian Park. I like my football stadiums falling apart. And I know it's all right. I don't like the way it's set out with the away fans and the loudest Cardiff fans are so far apart that it just, as well as the design of it, it just kills the atmosphere. So you don't get that intensity and you don't get that loud sort of atmosphere because the sounds just dissipates very quickly. Look, looks lovely. It's a nice stadium. I'm not saying anything like that, particularly with the view of who our guest is next week. But it is what it is.
I've been on a number of occasions, and was it the last time I came? The last time I went? Oh no, the second last time I went when they got promoted against Ipswich Town when they drew 0-0. That was phenomenal, and the atmosphere was amazing because it was a sellout. And it was absolutely fantastic. But other times I've been when it's been quite dull and empty, and probably lacking a bit of atmosphere from the away end, from the home end, and a little bit of everything with probably the way that the team was playing as well. It's hard to get an atmosphere going when there's not much happening on the pitch as well. You know what I mean? So you've got to probably take it into context. You know what I mean? That the players thrive off the atmosphere, the fans thrive off what's going on the pitch. So it's a bit of a double act needs to happen in order for that to bring it all together.
Indeed. Matthew Angel says, Willie, you mentioned about giving 100% every game. My memories of watching you was that you'd never stop running for 90 minutes. Did you do any extra training outside of the club's training, or was it just down to your work ethic on game days?
Just down to my work ethic. I trained how I played, to be fair, which is probably why people thought I was so angry. I tended to go to in every training session 100%, and that's the way I approached it. So that would show on a Saturday, more or less. And listen, I had to do that to make an impact in the game. I wasn't quick, I wasn't strong, I didn't score goals. I could read the game, I could get a tackle in. I'd be available for the football all the time. But I had to make sure I had a high work rate to be effective as part of the whole team wheel, really. And that was my role within the team.
I'll second that, Si, because there was no better trainer I've come across, especially at Cardiff City. You know what I mean? I came across someone similar to Willie, similar position, similar attributes, same attitude. Robbie Mustoe, Middlesbrough, same position, just ran all day, just wanted to run all day, and he said the same thing. I've spoken to him before about in reunions and things about that, a little bit disrespectful about himself and saying what you just said. Well, I don't agree with what you've said, but. That you said you weren't this and you weren't that. You know what I mean? Your qualities, what you had, outshone others because of the attitude that you had, and you always wanted to be on Will's training, Will's team in training. If that was 5-a-side, if that was a competition, because if someday you didn't really want to be there, or someday you'd been a bit naughty on a Sunday, or whatever have happened through the week, and you just want to be on Willie's team because he could carry you through, you know, and
yeah.
One thing I will pick up on there, Willie said he didn't score any goals. I saw Willie score the best goal I've ever seen in my life. He scored a worldie at Margate. Will, tell everybody about your worldie at Margate. Do you remember it?
Do I remember? I've got it saved. It's the only goal I scored. They weren't even my football boots. They were Leggy's football boots. Ian forgot to pack my boots, so I had no boots, so I had to borrow Leggy's boots, and it was free kick outside the box, and I was wearing, I think they were like what were those boots that Beckham wore years ago, the Predators or whatever.
Predator ones, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, they were them. So I just thought all of a sudden I'll take this free kick and bend it into the top corner. I bent it all right. It bobbled about 3 times before I went into the bottom corner.
It was one of the funniest goals. It was probably one of the funniest celebrations because it was just one of those moments where we all just looked at each other thinking, that's never going to happen again. You know, the goal, it was amazing, but it was just one of those moments that you just knew it was going to happen when the kit man forgot to put his boots in. But no, it was. I remember that was a long. I remember that was a long trip, by the way. That was a camel ride that to get there and get back. But I'm glad we didn't embarrass ourselves.
Yeah.
So I've picked
exactly.
I've picked 3 questions to finish. So Andy's dad says, do you think the Premier League will continue taking a knee next year now that the fans are coming back? The inevitable has happened and the majority are booing, which could ruin the sentiment behind it.
Oh, question. Look at the father coming out with some decent questions.
He's good, mate. He's good, mate. He's very consistent.
Listen, I think it's down to personal preference at this stage, isn't it? Do I think it should? Do I think it should be done? Listen, if you feel that strongly about something, then do it. That's my thought process on it. If I was playing at this moment in time, would I do it? I probably would initially. Do I need to continue to do it to keep sending the message out every week? Possibly. I have honestly no real opinion about it. I've got no problem with people that do it. I've got no problem with people that abstain from it. People who abstain from it doesn't mean that they don't believe that it's the right movement. It just feels that they don't have to do it. I've got no problem with that.
Yeah, I think people have got their own reasons, haven't they, for not doing it?
I think the problems we've got at the minute is because we've got no away fans in and away teams are doing it and home teams sometimes aren't doing it, that there's booing happening because there's no one to support them as well. And I think it's getting a little bit confusing that some are doing it, some aren't doing it. But I agree with Will. It's self-preference for me. And if people want to write something on social media, they're allowed to do it. If you want to go on the knee, then surely you're allowed to do it. Clubs are backing their players to make their own choices. So just for me, let it happen. And fans are in a privileged position at the minute. They're allowed back in football. So please don't waste your time booing your players or booing opposition players. Just go there and support your team.
Yeah,
just fair point.
I suppose the difficulty will be whether the referee is going to blow his whistle again for that knee or whatever. That's going to be the contentious thing or whatever going forward. But yeah.
But then the FA could make that job though, couldn't they? They could make that call straight away and say, we've done it for a certain amount of time. Players can still do it. They can start, but when that whistle goes, it's not for the knee, it's for the kickoff. So then they've got to do it at a certain time, different time, and do it themselves. And you know what I mean? They can make their own judgment then, can't they?
Yeah.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen Selway asked, could you talk a little bit about the atmosphere between Cardiff and Leeds in that famous FA Cup game?
That was amazing. I mean, I had quite a few friends over for the game, and they came over and they never experienced anything like it in their life. That it was electric. The buzz, and I've played a fair few games in my career. And the intensity of that occasion and the passion that was shown and I'm not one to bullshit about stuff like the whole lot. It actually was real. The passion, you could feel it. You could feel it coming onto the pitch, and then all of a sudden, when we got that equaliser and they had a man sent off, you could feel the belief coming from the terraces onto the pitch as well, and it was amazing. And obviously, you had Sam going around the pitch as well. Put the cat amongst the pigeons as well. To make it even more, scary. But it was an amazing occasion. It was an amazing result. It was great to be part of it. Great for Youngie to score the winner as well. He put a lot of time and effort into that club and great stalwart for the club as well. So it was great for him. And it was just a great occasion. And that night was a great night as well. I remember going down to town with my mates and seeing all the fans out there. It was just a great occasion to be part of. But then, of course, the following week we lose at home 2-0 to Peterborough in the league to bring us right down to earth.
Yeah,
but that's football for you.
Absolutely, it's one of them. Did you watch from the stands, Ant, because you were on the brink of signing?
No, I was.
I watched on TV.
I watched at home because obviously I'd spoke to Corky I spoke to Corky on the Wednesday before the game on the Saturday, and then obviously they get beat by Peterborough, and then he got beat by Wigan the following week, and he got sacked on the way home, and there was my move gone straight away. You know what I thought? You know what I mean? So lucky enough, it was still in the pipeline. But Will, just talking about that game though, you know what I mean, it's still remembered like the playoff final is, you know what I mean? So how proud are you that you played a massive part in the club's history? Because, you know what I mean, those 2 games are remembered throughout everyone's memory, you know what I mean? Because they say that if it wasn't for those 2 years, where they are now wouldn't have happened. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think we had to get promoted that season financially, I'd imagine, because there was a lot put into the club, and we managed to get over the line. The Leeds game was not expected, first and foremost. So to win a game like that, you're elated, you're delighted, you're buzzing, everyone's buzzing. The promotion, there was an expectancy for us to go up that season, especially after the season before when we got beaten the last minute in the semi-final by Stoke. And then the following season, you know, we were a bit unfancied going into the playoffs because we were on a poor run going into it, even though we had a decent squad. But we managed to get over the line against Bristol City and the QPR as well. I would say that there were some of the scrappiest games I was involved in, but we managed to show the old resilience to get through them. I felt more relief than anything else after getting promoted, because it felt like it was a job that needed to be done, and it was done. And I remember sitting lying in the bat after the game, and I just felt relief rather than elation. Whereas the Leeds game was a little bit different. I kind of jumped on the old kind of delighted train on that one, like, you know. But yeah, I think, listen, I'm absolutely very proud to have played for the club and through a lot of the successes as well. And, you know, from a personal point of view, it's amazing to be part of that. And I was just delighted to see him progressing onwards, because when I signed for that club, you know, we played at Ninian Park. We weren't very fashionable at that time. I don't think. Sam came in and changed things around and brought some really good young players into the club, and then brought some expensive players into the club, and that continued for the next, well, up until now, we're, you know, in a magnificent stadium and nearly on the brink of the Premier League again this season. So it's been great progression for the club.
But listen, I totally agree. I think the football club has evolved. I think the football club had to get promoted that year, and I've said it on here and I've said it previously. If we hadn't got promoted that year, I could probably name off my head 7 players who definitely wouldn't have been there. Probably another 5 who potentially wouldn't have been there. And that football club would have evolved so much, and it would have potentially had to start again, because you look at the manager. Would the manager still been there? Possibly not. You know what I mean? And it was such a strange time. You said about relief. They were the worst 3 games I think I've ever come across. 1-0 win, a 0-0 draw, and another 0-0 draw. Really, you know what I mean? 90-minute games. It was just horrific. You know what I mean? There was just, especially for a team who hadn't kept many clean sheets in the last 6 games. We had really bad form, so we hadn't kept clean sheets, but we kept 3 games. We scored goals, but we couldn't score goals. It was just a surreal time in the last couple of weeks. And then we had, obviously, after the game, to try and get ready to start again, so to speak, to go to the Championship, which is just something which dreams are made of at the time.
100%, mate. I think to finish us off, I've left Donna out today. I don't think I've asked one question from her, so I feel a bit bad. But she asked a really good question earlier, which I think is a nice way to finish the show off. And that is, she asked Willie Boland, what was it like living with Andy Campbell?
It's a good question.
I think was this when I first moved up to Hartlepool camps and I stayed in your gaff for a week or so, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was sound. It was grand. Cams is a good lad. I always had a good laugh with Cams. We always we've had a few beers in our time. I get on really well with him. And luckily enough, when I moved up there, they put me in for let me stay there for a week. Otherwise, I was staying in some crap hotel on Seat and Crew front. So I was very grateful for that. But
5-star, you know, 5-star hotel.
Yeah, 1927 probably it was 5 stars. But no, how was it? It was good. It was good, and you know, I've had many a night over in Cam's house in the past, playing pool and having a few beers and up to all the hours, and we always have a bit of crack. Like, you know, I always take the piss out of each other.
Yeah, we did.
Willie Boland, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Really appreciate your time and your honesty. Always a good laugh, but I appreciate you
cheers,
giving us your time, mate.
And listen, thanks to everyone else, by the way, the comments, the questions, the chats. We're starting to really evolve now, and we're starting to really evolve because of everyone who's getting involved. The guests are amazing. The honesty is even better. You know what I mean? So just please continue to watch. Please continue to give us your feedback, and it's. we're getting there. Slowly and surely, we're getting there.
Indeed. And it's good to see some new names as well in the chat and stuff like that. Enjoying seeing some new viewers getting involved with the questions and stuff. But yes, indeed. Willie, thank you, mate.
Cheers, lads. Thanks a million. Listen, best of luck for the show in the future as well. I'll keep an eye out.
Cheers, Wells.
And thank you to everyone else, guys. Check out last night's live edition of My Story with none other than Mr. Andy Campbell, available on YouTube, Facebook, and audio download. That was a lot of fun. And after some suggestions from other people, I'll consider making that a live show in the future on a Sunday, but we'll see how we go. We'll be back Friday for the championship show. Look out for announcements regarding next week's guest, if I haven't already given it away again. But it's going to be a good one. That's all I can say. And it is, I believe, Andy, this is the first ever guest to come back for a second time.
Yeah, it's a first sequel.
Mm-hmm. I wonder who could possibly have enough to say that they would warrant 2 episodes. Wow, that'll be interesting. Danny Batten Fight Show Wednesday with another guest from the UK fight world, among other things, talking boxing, MMA and stuff. But check it out. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Most of all, big thank you to Black Diamond Sports. Please, guys, check out Bespoke Financial, Darren Ralston, and see if they've got anything which could help you out. Tell them that we sent you, and they will give you a free will worth £140 with any new policy which is taken out. That in itself is worth it. And yeah, I gave it away, but there we go. Always got to finish like this. A nice Ayatollah to finish.
Every Cardiff player took part, yeah.
Indeed.
Are we after 3?
Yeah, we have to wait. Willie's got a bit of a delay.
Happening?
You can just do. You got to do the Ayatollah, mate.
All right, yeah, no problem.
Go.
Crack on.
3, 2, 1, go.
And then I can't finish it and do it. That's the problem.
My mummy and daddy have been talking about life insurance. It sounds like something to protect my brother and me, but I don't really understand. Then my Auntie Louise told Mummy about Bespoke Financial Teesside. She said they're a local company who helped her with her life insurance. Mummy got in touch, and because they're based locally, a man called Darren was able to come to our house. He was really friendly. Darren stayed for a cup of tea and made it all really easy to understand. He said that life insurance will protect our home and family if anything bad were to happen. Like if Mummy or Daddy got sick, then we'd get enough money to take care of us, and our house would be paid for so it wouldn't get taken away. After an hour, Darren said goodbye and Mummy and Daddy seemed a lot happier. Once it was all sorted, we could all relax and watch a film together as a family. I don't know why they didn't do it sooner.